Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Well, John-Angus, thanks for joining me on the Rad Dads Show. I'm going to
Thanks for
start.
having me.
Yeah, you bet. I'm going to start the way we always do by asking, who are you?
My name is John-Angus MacDonald. I guess my job title is I play lead guitar and I'm a founding member of a band called the Trews, which has been going strong up here in Canada for just about 20 years. And I'm also a father of two little boys.
Right. So you're busy, but it's been kind of I guess I kind of always have to ask this question. Like, what's the last couple of years been like for you as a parent? I mean, you're a touring musician.
Mhm.
So that's kind of ground to a halt a little bit. You've had more time at home with the family. What's that been like for you guys?
It was, like it was shocking and strange and unusual and uncomfortable in some ways, like everybody else. It was not what we were expecting. The first time in our career, in about 20 years, where we were forced to stop. There's always some wheel in motion. There was always a studio session to get to, or writing sessions to do, or a tour to get on. And there was always just an infrastructure of plans and things we had to work around. And it's just everything just ground to a halt, which was so bizarre at first. It felt almost like a parallel universe or something. But it's not to say it wasn't without its silver linings. And I have an 8-year-old son and a 4-year-old son, and my 4-year-old was 2 when the pandemic
Right.
began, and when my 8-year-old was 2, I mean, I was probably home on an average about half of the year, for most of his time at that age, and
Right.
all the way up until he was 6. And with Isaac, I just spent my younger son, who's 4. I spent the last 2 years with him all the time. So I think it's going to be really shocking for him when we head out on tour in a couple of weeks here, and I'll be away for 3 straight weeks, which is probably his first time in memory of that happening.
Right. What's the adjustment for the kids been like now that things are kind of like, so he was 2 years old, Isaac, you said, was two
Yeah.
years old when all this started.
Yeah.
So I've kind of had 2 years of being inside, not too much, socialization. So I totally relate. I've got a 3.5 year old. So
Yeah.
similar kind of situation. Feels like she kind of missed out on a couple of years, really.
Yeah.
So what's that been like for you guys?
Well, it's very real, like what these kids and kids of every age have missed out on. They're not going to get it back. But there's ways that, you know, we sort of found a workaround. And as soon as we were able to get Isaac together with people his age that we knew in our community, in our block, at the park, or people's backyards, we did whatever we could, because those are pretty important building blocks, to
For
be able
sure.
to learn from other little people your age. And so we did whatever we could. But all that to say, Isaac is much more of a homebody as a result, and he's not as much of a social butterfly as his older brother. It's tough to say how much of that was sort of baked in and how much is just a function of what he went through in the last couple of years. But it's probably about 50-50. And, so it's funny to see the differences between the two. But, yeah, I'm kind of glad. It certainly feels like we're coming out of that sort of phase.
Yeah.
I didn't love the online learning. I didn't love the amount of screen time we had to kind of endure. Something we kind of try to mitigate even at the best of times, and then to be forced to do all that, I'm kind of glad that's over.
Yeah, for sure. The screen time thing is a really interesting conversation because prior to the pandemic, like you said, it's like you would kind of do your best. Well, maybe not everybody, but certainly that's what we did, do our best to limit that to some
Yeah,
degree, right? And you kind of had no choice at some points, certainly
yeah,
with online learning. So your older son probably had times when he was doing
yeah. He
school from
was.
home.
Yeah, it was like 3 big chunks of time, in maybe even more than that, in Ontario. Like a few times they went back and then they called it off again. Yeah, there was like a lot of big, like he was on the thing from, morning till afternoon. And, he would get frustrated and couldn't, like, feel like he couldn't interject in a proper way, because it's weird when there's like 20 kids on a screen.
Right.
So yeah, that wasn't a great experience. And I always found that kids have like a hangover from too much screen time. And that's how I know
Yes.
it's bad for you. That's how I know drinking's bad for me, because if I have too much, I have a hangover, and that's your body giving you feedback. So I feel like even my proof of concept that screen time is bad for you is like they have a hangover. They're like groggy and they can't concentrate and they feel like shit and
Yeah.
they're
They're
short.
irritable, right? They're
Yeah, exactly. It's like a hangover. So I was like, that's like proof right there that it can't be that good for you.
That's hilarious. I've never heard that before, but that's a really good comparison.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So, okay, so you guys are heading back out on tour in a couple of weeks, which is amazing. You're touring your new album came out in November, I guess, Wanderer.
Yeah, it's a new record that, again, we had the Omicron wave and that kind of called off. The tour was supposed to be in January, a lot closer to the release of the record, but here we are in May, finally getting it underway. But yeah, the record dropped in late November, and now we're just getting out to support it.
Yeah. Well, I love the record. We'll talk about the record in a little bit. But I want to ask you, this is a Rad Dad show, so I have to ask, do you consider yourself a rad dad?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't think your kids think of you as anything but dad, like no matter
Yeah.
what you do. So I feel like, Elliott in particular grew up on the road and he saw so many shows and we took him on tour in America and he's been over to Europe with us and he's been all across Canada with us. And I don't think he sees what I do as being anything that unusual or spectacular or anything. I think only when he got to school and other kids started asking him about my band, then he'd come home and be like, "Daddy, did you write a song called Tired of Waiting?" or whatever somebody said to him at school. And I'm like, "Yeah, we did that." And and he's like, "Okay, cool." Like he doesn't really fixate on it. It just kind of like. So anyway, roundabout way of saying, I don't know if my kids consider me a rad dad, and I certainly don't frame myself in that way to myself either.
Well, what do you think? So we asked, like, this is kind of the whole point of the show is to talk about what does it mean to be a rad dad? So it can mean whatever you want it to mean, I guess. Like, I guess to you, that concept of rad dad, or maybe even a good dad, like what does that mean to you? Like, what are those kind of qualities of a rad dad?
I just think showing up for your kids with all of your attention and focus as often as you can. And it doesn't have to be all like I have a weird job where I have to be away a lot, but when I'm home, trying to like make sure I'm there for them and listening to them and it's hard to do and we all know like the ins and outs of every day as a parent are can be chaotic and disorganized and it can be nutty and everybody's like got their own moods and their own but just trying to like be there for them as often as you can and remind yourself how short these years are. I guess that would be my definition of a rad dad, just showing up for them, listening to them, being there for them,
Being in the moment.
being in the moment's a big one because the days are tough. We all like
Yes.
the day, the nitty gritty of the day is tough, and you get, just to take a breath and stop and remind yourself how special these years are and how brief they are, and that if you are there for them, like they'll have a better sense of like security and safety, and they'll feel better about communicating their thoughts and all these kinds of things that have like really long term ripple effects. That's the other thing about parenting is like you're a lot of times you're just winging it and hanging on and trying to make it, and you don't even realize how much impact like you're going to have an impact on your kids that they'll be unpacking for the rest of their lives.
Yes. Oh my
and
God. Yeah.
and in the day to day, you're just trying to get through, and then you think of your own childhood, and you're like, well, they didn't really. They were just trying to get through too, and so it's like it recontextualizes everything becoming a parent.
Yeah. So, well, and you kind of mentioned earlier about time away from your kids. Like, you have had some experience with that, certainly with your older son. I guess your younger son, he would have been a baby when the last time you
Yeah.
were sort of touring.
Yeah.
What's that experience like? Like, how do you manage that kind of balance of being away from the family and stuff?
Well, certainly, like I know I was just disparaging screens, but like technology has helped a lot to be able to see each other. I grew up in a house where my dad was away and traveled a lot too, and
Okay.
there was none of that. So it was just like a voice on the other end of the line, maybe every other day, because long distance also cost a lot of money back then. But that helps. We also like the ground rule that my wife and I have had since we had kids is we try to limit the time frame to like 3 weeks. Like we find that after 3 weeks we just start leading completely separate lives, and it's just like we don't think about each other as much because I'm so entrenched in this other routine and she's so entrenched in this other routine that like you sort of start to disconnect a little bit, and we don't, to avoid that, we try to keep the time window to like 3 weeks or less, and if it's going to be more, I'll try to bring them out to meet me, or I'll try to get back in between. That's just been a good rule of thumb for us.
Yeah. Was that something that was tough for, I guess, the band as a whole to kind of adjust to when people in the band started having kids, like, you know, changing that schedule up a little bit?
It changes everything. Jack was the first one. Our bass player had his oldest son, Merrick, about 2 years before I had Elliott. And it does change everything. I mean, it changes your considerations, you know, it changes your what you value and what's your priorities. But now we have a drummer who has 2 kids. He had twins during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
In May of 2020. Yeah, it was wild. He wasn't even allowed to be in the room. It was like the
oh man,
the hyper panic of COVID.
Crazy.
But anyway, now we have 3 dads out of like the 4 principal members of the band who all have kids under 10, and there's 6 kids under 10 in between those 3 dads. So now it's easier. Now we can, like, when it was just one guy and we were trying to, like, 1 out of 4, and we have a 5th guy that plays with us too, and when it was just 1 out of 5, it was just harder to like make those compromises all the time. Or it wasn't harder, it just took a lot more coordinating. But now there's so many of us, like, we just like to jam during school hours, like, or daycare hours, like, so like our jams these days are from 10 to 2 if we're getting ready for a tour. Like, it's like drop the kids at school, get them squared away, everybody can drive to the space, start at 10, get out of there by 2. You can get back and either pick your kids up or be there for the after school routine. And that's funny because now that there's more parents than there are non-parents, it works out great.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I can imagine in the beginning when it's just one person, you kind of got a bit of competing priorities, right?
Yeah.
But now, you guys are kind of more on the same page, and you can shorten those tours, and everybody sort of has the same same goal.
Everybody wants to take that break now. It's not like we wouldn't like forcibly cancel something that was a good opportunity, but we just try to work around it. So like, there's always some measure of flexibility when you're making these plans,
Right. So you talked about your priorities changing when you became a dad. What else changed for you? Like, reflecting back on that, I guess where were you guys in your career? What was happening 8 years ago when you became a dad? Like, what was that transition like?
We had just released our, I think it was our 5th or 6th album. It was just a self-titled album called the Trews, and it all, like, we made it, and Jenny was getting more and more pregnant. We were in the studio, and I remember having the baby, and like within I think it was like 3 weeks, we had to go to the Juno Awards. And I left like, because he was 10 days late, and I thought I'd have like at least a month, and it ended up only being like a couple of weeks by the time we were out of the hospital, that I had to leave right away. And then that was when because I had to go out and do a lot of stuff right away, we decided they would just come with us. And we ended up doing like almost a month-long tour of the States with Jenny and me and Elliott, just following the bus, like following in our car with the car seat, and like, because can't really subject the rest of the group to a howling 3-month-old. But that's what we did. Yeah.
Or like, you guys need to be quiet for 3 hours while the baby sleeps.
Yeah, exactly. That was a really punishing tour though, because you're getting it from both ends. Like, you got to stay up late and play your show and unwind and get back to the hotel, and then you get back to the hotel and you got to be the day starting at 5:30 or 6. So it was pretty punishing on the sleep. That first leg. But something else I got used to. I don't really stay up very late anymore. I mean, I will on the road once I get into that routine because I have to, but at home I really don't stay up late very much. And I also moved towns. Like, I was living in downtown Toronto in a condo. My wife and I got married. We lived on Queen West. I've been in Toronto for 10 years. I'm from Nova Scotia, but I've been in Toronto in the busy parts of downtown for 10 years. And then having a kid had us house hunting, and we ended up buying in Hamilton. So it changed my life. Like, you asked me how it changed my life. It changed my life in like a million ways. I moved towns. I changed sleep. It changes everything. It changes your priorities. Changes everything.
And so you guys did sort of this tour kind of right after baby was born, which sounds like, looking back on it, probably some pretty special memories.
It was a cool adventure. It really was. Yeah, no, and everybody was, I mean, credit to my band. Everybody was very cool about it. And, he
Yeah.
would be there at sound check and napping with his, industrial headphones on or whatever.
It's
Uh,
interesting how babies though, like you kind of, depending, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but you kind of can sometimes get away with, like, at the very beginning, kind of just bringing them wherever,
yeah,
so
they are pretty portable. It's when they start to walk that it becomes like everything becomes a much bigger consideration. Like,
yes, what can they
where
fall off of? And
yeah, where are the stairs and where are the edges where they can fall and hit their heads and all that stuff? Yeah, so
yeah,
that all changes it.
but it sounds like you've managed to have other opportunities over the years where your kids and your family kind of join you on tour as well.
Yeah, if we can, if there's a couple, usually it works out that there'll be a show and then a couple of days off, or
Okay.
a show and then a couple of days off, then another show, and we'll just bring them out for like 4 or 5 days, and that way we can enjoy, a bit of the town we're in. And we had a really cool trip right before COVID, which was like made even better, in our memories because of what we went through in COVID. But we were playing a gig in the south of Spain, and we flew them all over, and we spent like basically 5 days on either end of the show. So we were there for almost 2 weeks, and we were in Portugal and Spain, and
Yeah.
it was like in the fall of 2019. Uh,
Nice.
and it was just taking opportunities because they present themselves, and in light of what happened next, we were very glad we took that adventure.
Yeah, it feels like you just snuck it in, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, that's really cool. Did you have any fears about becoming a dad?
Um, I guess so. I mean, it's hard to put myself back in that frame of mind. I don't know if you had this experience, but when we had our kids, it was like they were always there. And I know this is like the
Mhm.
weirdest thing. It was like it was an inevitable outcome of you and your spouse getting together, or partner. Like that's what it felt like to me. And it felt like, oh, of course. And I know that sounds really weird and flaky, but that's just the way that I felt. I didn't, but I can't put myself back. I think I was worried about how birth would go.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
were pretty anxious about that. And we also, he was 10 days late. So we were really uptight for those last couple of weeks, not knowing
Yes.
how it was going to go. Second time was much more relaxed about that stuff.
Yeah, you're not as worried about the unknown, right?
Yeah, I don't think anybody quite prepares you for. People tell you like, "Oh, bud, you're in for a while." They say that kind of stuff, kind of like vague stuff. But
Yeah.
you know, I don't think anybody really prepared me for like how little like sleep you get in those first
Yeah.
days. Like in like
It's
maybe
like survival mode.
it's survival mode, and
Yeah.
there's a real lesson in it because we did have an album coming right at that time, and I had obligations, and we didn't really do a great job of planning it that first time around. And like you really have to force yourself to live in the moment. You have two options: you can collapse and like fall apart, or you can really just be like, everything's fine in this exact moment. I can't get overwhelmed by how little sleep I'm running on, or if I'll make it to the airport. And like you just have to sort of like really zen out and be like, this is temporary. I'm going through this now, and I'm not gonna like get too frazzled by it.
Yeah.
Just gonna like sort of, again, it's that living in the moment thing where you're like, nothing's on fire, nobody's sick, everything will work out. Yes, you only had an hour and a half of sleep last night, but you'll get over that. So
Yeah.
just sort of
Yeah.
that plowing through mentality. And I think most people do rise to that challenge. I mean, by and large, it's just kind of a testament to the human condition, I guess.
Yeah. Is that like biological, or what is that? Because I agree. It's such a common thread between, you talk to other parents, and everybody's, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have that kind of similar experience. You almost have like amnesia about how hard it was, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like look back, and I don't know so you have a 4-year-old is your youngest. I
Yeah.
don't know if you have this. I'm kind of starting to get this now, where I'll see people with a baby and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of missed that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember
Well,
that.
we live in a very like family oriented neighborhood in Hamilton. So there's a park that everybody goes to, and we now when we look around, we're like, oh no, we're not the young parents anymore. There's like a new crop of like younger parents that we like visibly younger. They're like in their late 20s.
Yeah.
Not late 30s, and in my case 40. So it's just funny to see that cycle through, and then you see their little baby, and you're like, and you do kind of forget what it was like. Yeah, we've had that chat. I don't know what'll come of it, but
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's always the thing. It's like, I think there is something to that like amnesia effect where you kind of like forget how tough it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And that probably does serve a biological purpose or something.
Yeah, like the continuation of the species.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were so traumatized by it that you'd never do it again, I don't think we would have
Yeah.
made it this far.
Yeah. So fatherhood has obviously been really positive and rewarding for you. If you had to distill it down, like what are the most rewarding things about being a dad?
Getting to know your kids. I mean, like what I find really funny is like I find you might relate to this, or maybe some of your listeners can relate to this, but like it's not really what you say to your kids. Like, as you know, it's hard to like tell them, don't, color on the walls or don't
Yeah.
walk on that part of the curb, or like they don't tend to listen to what you say, but they do mimic how you are. And I
Yeah.
think that like a lot of what your kids learn from you are just from observing how you are in the world and how you order through the drive-through window. You're going to hear them echo that a little bit, and it's not stuff you're trying to teach them. They're just going to pick it up, and I find that really fascinating to sort of see the stuff that you could know they got from you, and then there's a whole other part of them that you're not sure where it came from.
Yeah.
And that part I find really fascinating, and like each of my boys have their own unique personality, and they're really different in so many ways, and I find just like observing that and like getting to know that to be probably the most rewarding, like enriching part of it for me.
Yeah. Kind of seeing that individuality
Yeah,
develop, right?
you're getting to know this thing that you technically created,
Yeah.
but that is autonomous and is its
Yeah.
own, it's their own person,
Yeah,
and
you'd
they
think
have,
they should be like a mirror image of you, and in some ways they are.
yeah,
Sometimes some of the bad ways, right? Which
yeah,
is
that's what I
its
mean. Yeah,
own thing.
yeah.
But in other ways, yeah, you're like, how did you pick that up? And I think especially, I don't know if it was this way for you, but like once they start going to school and stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like, oh, you have friends. Like,
yeah.
how do I not know about these friends, right?
I know they get their own little cliques and their own little
Yeah,
social things going on, and that to me is fascinating too because now they're in somebody else's world and in somebody else's life, and they're having influence in their own way. And like, how did this happen? How did it happen so quick? And like, I kind of want to be a fly on the wall too, all at the same time.
yeah, yeah. You're like that dad, like peeking around the wall of the school, watching what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you like is music big in your house?
Music is huge. In fact, I mean, it's kind of a funny story that ties into our new record. Elliott, from the time he was 2, we'd catch him playing drums on his lap
Cool.
in his car seat. Like he would just drum along, and I could tell he had some rhythm. And so we got him a drum set like really early when he was 2 years old, and immediately like he could keep a beat. He could always find the 2 and 4. He had a great sense of rhythm, and so he became this kind of unbelievable drummer. Like, I mean, for his age, unbelievable. Like we would put stuff up just for our friends on Instagram or something, and people were always like, "Holy crap, this kid really is good." And so everywhere he went, people wanted him to play, and it was pretty funny. And then we started kind of writing songs together because he grew up in a house where like 4 or 5 grown ass men show up at the door, then disappear into the basement or up in the loft where I am now, and invent songs for
Yeah,
hours on end. Like that's to him is just what normal adult behavior is. And I don't think he realized it at
hilarious.
school that right now that's not really normal adult behavior, that guys just sit around in a circle with guitars and like hum melodies and try beats and try lyrics until something comes of it. And so he's seen this process repeat itself a few times, and like then he'd be like, "I like your new song, this song," and he'll like
Cool.
then those songs eventually come out in the world, and he'll sometimes hear them on the radio. And so in his mind, this is just a normal thing that people do. So he then starts writing songs. So he gets behind the drums and he's like, "I made up this song," and he'd be like a he'd just play beats. And at one point and so I sort of encouraged it and like like, "Cool, tell me how you want it to go. How should it sound?" Like like try to like get him to like encourage the behavior of songwriting.
Yeah.
And at one point he said, "I want to write a song called 'I Know What It's Like to Be the Enemy.'"
Mm,
Wow, that's a pretty sophisticated lyric. What is that about? He's like, "Oh, it's about the bad guys in Marvel movies." And I was like, "Oh, okay." That's really funny, but I loved the line. So
yeah.
I immediately put my own chords and melody to it. and that's like the current
That
single
became the
on
song Enemy.
on
That
our
just,
record.
the video
Yeah,
just came out, right?
I know. Yeah, so it sort of morphed and shifted, but it was like it was from going down in the basement with him and jamming that like that song came about. That's the reason. And another song called Permission on the new record was just again, he's so energetic, and like he was like 6 years old with this song Permission. Like he would just like bash away and bash away with so much energy, like the kind of energy I forgot about in rock and roll.
Yeah.
You get more in your head. And I was just like trying to match his energy, and I would write all these riffs, and then I'd take the riffs to the band, and we'd make songs up. I'm like, because they would like the riffs, so like in a lot of ways, like we became like little songwriting duo. It was pretty funny.
That's so cool. So Enemy has like been in my head for the last few days. I've been listening to it on repeat. It's so good. And
Cool.
you kind of, not only did you and your son kind of write that song and come up
Yeah,
with it, but
yeah.
you kind of take the lead on that song too.
Yeah, for the first time, did a lead vocal on a Trews record. Again, it was a function of like, sort of Elliott came up with the line.
Yeah.
I shaped the song, and then I demoed the song, and I played everything on the demo because we were all working from home. And then I think it was just kind of a case of demoitis. We just got used to hearing my voice on it,
Yeah.
and thought it made the most sense just to have me sing it. It doesn't make a ton of intuitive sense to take lead vocals when we have such a good singer in the band, but it's just the way it worked out on that tune, and I'm really happy with it.
Well, it must be special for you too to have that kind of connection to your son on that song and then it kind of be yours.
Yeah, given where it came from, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So tell me about the record too. So I mean, it came out in November, but it was kind of interrupted by the
Yeah.
pandemic too, right? This is kind of a record that was made over a period of time. You weren't expecting it to take that long.
No, we had started it in again like the early winter or late fall of 2019. We went to Nashville, and we worked with Rich Robinson of the Black Crowes, who's an old
Yeah.
friend of the band, and we had started this thing with him. We did 3 songs, and we came back to Canada. We did the Christmas thing, and then we went on a little tour, and we were planning on coming back in late March of 2020 to kind of finish it. And we all know what happened, and that just never came to pass because the border stayed closed for like almost 2 years or something. So we just had to like, it took, having all the things canceled, it just took us like 3 or 4 months to even conceive of what we could do next. So it wasn't until like August of 2020 that we were even back in the studio. And that was just because we had to figure out when studios were open and what their capacities were going to be and what their rules were going to be. And it was very odd. So we got on a lot of these kind of Zoom type sessions, and we wrote. The only silver lining, not the only, there were several, but one of the silver linings was we had more time to write, and you always need more time to write. You're always sort of under the gun with making a record. It's like, you have until September, then you're back in the studio. So whatever you have ready, we did get more writing in, which was helpful. And a lot of it was like this, and we all had to get up to speed with our tech and our home tech and our home studios and everything else. So that's what we did. And by August, we were ready to do 3 more. We worked with the producer who did our previous record, Civilianaires, a guy named Derek Hoffman, and then retreated and wrote some more. And then by November, we had another fresh batch of tunes. Among them was I Want to Play, which was the lead-off single of Wanderer. And we cut that with Eric Ratz, who's sort of a well-known Canadian rock producer, at his studio. And then we kind of just got that in right before they sort of, shut everything down again at Christmas. So it was all skin of our teeth, like pivoting, making plans, like trying to pull things together last minute, working from home, working remotely, not being in the same room a lot. We all that stuff. So just the weirdest record we've ever made. I mean, as far as the process of making it.
So I Want to Play clearly has a like pandemic reference. Like this is a song about the pandemic and like getting back out there. Your tour coming up is I Want to Play, right? Yeah. That's the name of the tour.
Yeah.
So you guys must be kind of like chomping at the bit to get back out there.
Yeah, the song was just like a plead to like please
let's go.
Let's get back. Like we understood everything and why we had to do what we did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a protest song in that way, but it was just like that pining for like the release that was just always so available to us. And that sort of like connecting with people and being out in the world. And like, we always took it for granted and never thought anybody could take it away from us. Like, music has always been a little bit recession proof. Like, sometimes people need music even more, when times are tough. It's like alcohol stores, it's like people drink when they're happy and they drink when they're sad. They listen to music when they're happy and they listen to music when they're sad. We're not pandemic proof, and we just didn't think we'd live through it. So, so it was just like a big like primal scream to like, let's get back at it. Let's do, like, we want to do what we love again. So that's where that came from. And it happened because we were writing songs in that late fall period again, where we were supposed to go out and do this holiday train gig that was going to be like 30 shows, and it had been canceled in 2020 and it had been moved to 2021. And the day we found out that was canceled, we wrote "I Want to Play," which is where the line about the train, I want to get on a train in a global pandemic, comes from.
I was curious about that. Like, what was the connection with the train? That totally makes sense.
Yeah, that was literally, the news came and it was like bad news from your manager, call number 173. Like, we've had nothing. But every time the phone rang and I saw my manager, I'm like, more bad news.
I was wondering, like, is this how these guys tour? Do they like get on CP Rail and head out west?
No, it was just because of that particular gig. So we got real specific on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was immediately that song felt like a sort of a pandemic anthem to us, and we thought we have to lead with it. And we actually thought, foolishly, we thought it'd be like out of date by the time it came out, because it came out in March, and we're like, well, this will be over by March. And then as soon as we put it out, more lockdowns, and we're like, oh, I guess this is like, unfortunately, very relevant still.
Yeah, even still today, like, you're back out on tour and there's still, like this thing in the back of. Yeah,
I knock on wood every time, because there's still tours getting canceled and stuff. But we're hell-bent and determined to make it happen. I mean, as safely as possible. But we're all, taking every precaution to make sure we can get, from the start to the finish.
Yeah, I'm sure tour looks a bit different these days, hey, in terms of some of that stuff.
A little less social than it used to be. A little less meeting and greeting, and a little less in-person shaking of hands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, ripping it up after.
Hopefully not for too much longer, because connecting with people is what we do. So I don't really love being sequestered, all on my own on the bus or anything. I like to go out and meet people, but for now we're still taking every precaution.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm super stoked on the new album, and you guys are coming through Edmonton, May 30th.
Yes.
At Midway. So super excited about that.
Yeah, the new venue. We've never played the Midway. I've been hearing good things though.
Yeah, so I think the Midway, because I haven't been to Midway either. I think they just kind of renovated it and stuff like that. But it used to be called The Ranch, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's like a big, I think it was like a country bar, basically.
Yeah,
it makes sense, right? And I've been to a couple things there, like some events and stuff. But it's a pretty cool room. So if they kept kind of the same design, it's pretty awesome. It's got a good stage and stuff.
Okay, cool.
So
we're looking forward to it. It's been a minute since we made it. We did do something called Together Again in the summer of 2021. 2021. It was like the picnic tables. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did hear about that. Yeah.
It was like everybody had to stay at their assigned table. We did a few oddball little gigs that summer, like drive-ins, and like nothing was a normal show. But we did get to Edmonton, and that was the last time. And this will be the first time under a sort of normal-ish circumstance.
Right. Family coming with you on your tour at all, or they're staying back at home?
Not on this one. There's just school years wrapping up, and it doesn't come at a great time. And actually, with the amount of time that Elliott in particular has spent out of real school, he loves being in school.
Yeah, my daughter's the same way.
Yeah, he loves it, and I'm like, love it while you love it, because you're gonna be a teenager in a blink of an eye, and you're probably gonna hate it like all teenagers do.
Yeah.
So like, if you're loving it, more power to you.
Yeah, that's great, and you guys can kind of get out there and stay focused too on what you need to do.
And then we lead, like, as soon as we kind of swing out west in a straight line and come back, and then once we're back, we sort of move into like the weekend warrior schedule, where we're doing a lot of flying out on the weekends, picking off 2 shows and flying back. And so I'll be home a lot more, and we'll probably bring the family all along to one of those.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. dude, I really appreciate your time today. New album, Wanderers, out. Go check it out for people out there listening or watching. Trews are playing Midway in Edmonton, May 30th. When does the tour kick off? Is it the 24th?
24th, we're in Winnipeg at the
Okay.
Burton's Theater, and then we head west from there all the way to Vancouver, and then make our way back. I think we'll be gone for about just under 3 weeks.
Nice. Well, that's super exciting. Any advice out there for dads listening, maybe for new dads?
New dads, you know, well, what we were saying earlier about, like just powering through those early months. Those are tiring times, but they're also some of the best times in your life, and you don't get too bogged down in the I don't know, the newness of it all and the tiredness of it all, and just because you will miss it. I mean, I can guarantee you, even every single phase you will miss a little bit.
Yeah.
And it also does, in its own way, also get better and better and better, because then you're getting to know this person a little more every day, and you're watching them come into their personalities, and then you have this new relationship in your life, which is probably going to be one of the best relationships in your life. I mean, unless you're doing it very wrong, I think you have the chance to have the best relationship in your life. I mean,
it's so powerful, right? Like there's just something about it that's like you can't even describe what that's like.
Absolutely, and that's the opportunity that's ahead of you as a new parent.
Yeah.
Is to have the greatest relationship of your life. So it's a lot, but it's also great.
Well, let's end it there. That's awesome. I really appreciate your time again. Thanks for being part of the Rad Dad Show. People love hearing what other dads have to say. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your experience and your stories. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys on May 30th.
Well, thanks, Brett. Looking forward to getting back out there, and I hope to see you at the show.
You bet. Thanks, man.